Good morning, evening, or afternoon to my fellow hustlers, depending on whenever you're watching this. This is Elijah from the Side Hustler Society, and we're going to be coming at you with another action packed episode today, at least when it comes to action packed in the wallet. A lot of y'all are probably aware of a platform called Turo, and it's a platform you can use to actually rent a car out in order to make some money, extra money, or just you could actually have this be your full time income if you so desire, but I've actually never done it before. I have some, I won't say investment, but I have experience with using a car to make money because, as y'all know, on my other channel, the app Lifestyle, its roots is in the gig economy, driving for Uber, Lyft, Uber Eats, and every now and then some DoorDash stuff like that. But I never really got involved with Turo. But I actually did get the honor to meet someone who has a whole YouTube channel where they cover a lot about Turo, and she's been on the Turo platform for quite some time. Her name is Yuly Torres, and we actually met at Vid Summit. So just like I met Lauren from the last episode at Vid Summit, I also met Yuly at Vid Summit. It's called Networking on Purpose, baby. So Yuly's a computer engineer with a track record of problem solving and a talent for optimizing various aspects of life. She has diverse professional background spanning more than 2 decades, where she has held various roles, including technical and business consultant, law firm and systems administrator, developer, IT support, bookkeeper, paralegal, and more. She has recently decided to depart from the corporate world and embark on her entrepreneurial journey, consisting of various business ventures with a focus on consulting, as well as her new YouTube channel, where she hopes to leverage the knowledge she has gained over the years to assist individuals and small businesses in becoming tech savvy, efficient, and innovative. So, with that bio being read, I'm real excited to bring her on to the show. Let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started.
Welcome to the Side Hustler Society podcast with your host, Elijah Bilel. This is where you can find out more about hustles that are best for you. And of course, make more money in the process. Elijah has been in the gig economy and freelance space for over 5 years and has done over 3,000 deliveries on Uber Eats. He's an Airbnb superhost, runs multiple YouTube channels, and is the author of the best-selling book, The Anatomy of Financial Success. It's his mission to empower people with the tools needed to be successful. Now, welcome your host, the king of side hustles, Elijah Bilel.
Okay, we are on. Yuly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. How's your day going so far?
Good, good. How about yours?
It's been all right. I mean, I always judge a day by the weather, and we're kind of in that in between before it gets too cold, too hot. So it's kind of perfect right now. Hopefully, it can last for a little while because Texas weather is kind of capricious.
Nice. Well, lucky you. We're in the just hot.
And what part of the country are you in again?
South Florida.
Ooh, yeah. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
hot, like year round, kind of.
Our nice cool is like, ooh, it's in the 70s today.
Ooh. Yeah. Next time I want to go get a tan, I'll have to visit Florida.
Yeah, I think it's 84 right now, 85.
Okay. But yeah, a lot of people, when it comes to this Turo game that we're going to be talking about today, a lot of people, well, actually, I think everyone has heard of Turo at some point. And they know the basic premise of, it's basically a place where you can rent your car, but they have a lot of questions. They might be kind of hesitant on, like, how does that all work? How much money can you really make? And that's why I'm looking forward to this show because I've never actually done Turo before. It's something I do have an interest in doing myself at some point. So I have a lot of the same questions that my audience has about Turo. I know it is a great way to make money if you just have a car literally just sitting there collecting dust and it hits all the qualifications. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's like the easiest way to enter it. You know, you have it there. There's nothing else to do. You could just immediately put it to work. Kind of like people who do Uber. They just jump right into a car and start working. So yeah, that's definitely, of course, there's some little things that I know we'll get into them, but there are some little things you want to look into before you can do that.
But speaking of that Turo life, so how did you first get started with the Turo platform?
Yeah, so I don't remember when I first heard of it or from who, but it was a while back, a few years ago. I actually had moved temporarily to another part of the state, and it was a smaller town. And there, I really didn't use my car. I was then started working from home, and so I didn't use my car at all. It was just sitting there. And at that point, it was a pretty high payment, and I was like, maybe I could just kind of at least make the car payment. It's literally just sitting there. I would use it probably once a month. And so I started it then, and it did okay. But it was a smaller market. It was not, what it could be in some areas. It was a college town. And so I did it. Then I moved back to South Florida, and I had been thinking about doing it, again, and also buying cars to just specifically put it on Turo. That one was, that part was scary because now you're like, oh, a whole new car payment. And what if like nobody rents it, So I decided last year to just go ahead and just take the chance and see what happens. And so I bought a car specifically just to list it on Turo. And I listed my own car as well because again, it was still just sitting there. So I did that in October, and from October to December, it actually did pretty well. And then January, my car needed like new tires, and so I took it off. So basically, this entire year, I've been just doing the car that I bought, which is a large 8-seater SUV that I bought just for Turo. So, and I'm actually currently right now looking to purchase 2 more cars in the next week or so. So I'll possibly have 3 or 4 cars.
Okay, so it sounds like you decided to give it a try, but the car that was just sitting there started doing pretty well. Then you saw it as, hey, this is actually a way that I can make some decent money. Let me actually double down, expand the investment, and see how much cash flow I can make with it. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, and I've definitely, also have seen a million other Turo host videos, and constantly just learning and seeing what they're doing and seeing, how best to go about it. But definitely, it has been doing great, and so I feel like it's a thing. It's not the same thing as real estate. Obviously, real estate, it's an appreciating asset, and this is a little different, but it's very different in the sense also that you can get into it with little or no, you like we said, you have a car sitting at home, or you buy a $6,000 car. So it's very different from like having to give a huge down payment for a real estate property. So obviously there's different pros and cons, but yeah, it's definitely a lot easier, you could say, to get into it and to grow.
Gotcha. You brought up real estate, and everyone on the podcast already knows I actually have some rental properties on Airbnb. And Turo could actually be something that's complementary, especially if you're doing like corporate housing or midterm rentals with people staying over 30 days or maybe under a year. That means that they're going to need some way to get around town, and they may actually be open to getting a rental car from you if you could provide that. So if you have it listed on Turo, but let's say you don't make it available publicly, you just have it so that only your guests can rent it. That could be a conduit for you to make some extra money on top of the money you're making from that guest from the rental. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm actually thinking of. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
even
definitely thought
in it.
about that.
Yeah, so it can actually be pretty complementary to some of your real estate endeavors. So when you had mentioned, obviously putting your car on Turo, then you actually went out and bought a car specifically so you can rent it out on Turo, and now you're looking at buying 2 more. A lot of people, I'm assuming Turo is kind of like Uber in the sense of like there's some people that think that they can actually get out and just Uber their car, but then they actually try and put it on the platform and they find out they actually can't because their car doesn't meet certain qualifications. Now, in Uber's case, there's very few cars that don't meet it, but I'm sure Turo has some standards on like what requirements they require for a vehicle to be put on the platform. So, could you go into details on like what requirements would someone need to know for their vehicle to be able to be on Turo? Because imagine someone goes to buy a car specifically to put on Turo and it doesn't even qualify for it. That would suck.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so there's a few things, and also if this is assuming you're in the U.S. So like they have different laws and rules depending on what country you're in. But for the U.S., it has to be newer than 12 years old. It has to have under 130,000 miles. It cannot be a rebuilt title, so it has to be clean title.
Mm-hmm.
There's some exceptions, like if you're doing like a classic car, obviously, because that'll be a lot older. But yeah, for the most part, those are the rules. Now, if you're already on the site, it's not like you'll get kicked off at 130,000 miles. You'll be grandfathered in, and then you can keep using that car. So it's not like, oh, well, I can only do it until it's 130,000 miles. That's not the case. You just can't list it once it's above that.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
That puts a lot of things in perspective because that is one of the things that
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, because yeah, they must have increased it because now when I looked at this was literally like 5 or 6 years ago. But back when I was heavy into the gig economy with the Uber and the Lyft and the DoorDash and that kind of stuff, I was curious about Turo, but I kind of shut myself down from looking at it because I did look at some requirements, and their requirement at the time was like it can't have over 100,000 miles. And my car didn't have over 100,000 miles, but it was kind of approaching. And I thought that, well, if it's already approaching, what's the point even doing it? Because once it hits 100,000, I wouldn't be able to put it on there anymore. But hearing you say that, I honestly didn't know that as long as you get it on the platform before it hits 100,000, it can still stay on the platform from that point going forward. It won't be disqualified if it goes over 100,000.
Yeah, and that's huge because it really, changes the numbers. Like how much am I going to be able to make on this car if if in 2 years I got to take it off? Now, how much has it depreciated? What's its value? Like, is it worth it? So it really would change your numbers drastically if that wasn't the case.
Right. I guess that adds more to the credence that like some people literally have fleets of cars that they put on Turo and do rentals and stuff like that. That scenario makes a lot more sense now. Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few people with like over 100 cars. There's a lot with like over 10, 20. Yeah.
Right.
And they also have requirements, so Turo's gotten big on the so like now you have to do, I believe it's annual inspections. So you'll have to take it to a place. It's, it's cheap, $35. I think you can actually even do it virtually. I did the last one virtually, where a mechanic is like on the phone and he's asking you to, yeah. But they do have, they do require inspections. And then also if there's a recall, they will automatically like unlist your car and you have to go take care of that until it's taken care of. So.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, and then of course, if you do decide on this thing, one of the things you want to think about is like, make sure you have good tires, make sure you're maintaining the car properly. One, because you don't want it to leave the guest stranded, but primarily because for safety reasons, you don't want the car to, a tire to explode, and now they crashed, and now you may end up in a situation where it's like, well, you weren't maintaining the car properly, so you never want to get into that.
Right.
So
obviously. Yeah, you want to make sure you're maintaining the car, obviously, because you care about the safety of your. What are the people that rent your car called on Turo? Are they guests? Are they customers? I'm
They're
trying
guests.
to figure out. Yes.
So they call them guests and hosts. So we're the hosts and the guests.
So they use the same terminologies they use on Airbnb. Okay. Gotcha. So when it comes to actually adding a vehicle, like what's the most important thing you should know when adding a vehicle to Turo? Or have we already covered it? Or is there something else that you want to share?
No, actually, I think there's two things that are like I don't know if they're equally as important, but that you should definitely do before anything at all. And that is, number one is obviously like do the research, because if you're in a market where nobody's renting cars, then you might as well not. I mean, granted, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost you anything to list it. So you could say, well, I'll just list it and see what happens. So that's not as big of a deal, but more so in like researching your numbers. So like, how much do you live near an airport? Is it worth you driving to drop off the vehicle at an airport? Or if you need to get an Uber back, that's going to cost you $100 each way, and you can only charge, let's say, I believe it's 120. I believe there's a limit on that. Then is it worth it? So that's what I mean by like, just make sure that you look at all of the numbers, because it's going to depend. There's so many factors that the numbers are going to depend on. But then the other really important thing that a lot of hosts don't even, and I didn't even know about this in the beginning. I found out, thankfully, right when I went to list the car that I bought just for Turo, and that is insurance. So the insurance requirements. So there's some states in the US that this doesn't apply to, a few, like I think less than a handful. But for the most part, from the research that I've done, most people can't. Like if you just wanted to go out right now and just list your car, you could do that. But if your insurance company were to find out, they could drop you.
They're going to drop you.
Because they do not want you to do Turo. And it's very different from, so they consider Turo car sharing and then Uber's ride sharing. And so there's still a lot, if not most insurances that do not want Turo. If they find out, they'll drop you. Most guests, this is something that I actually did, and I just want to mention that like a lot of these things I have like videos that I've done on, very like detailed videos, and the insurance was one of them that I really wanted to do, because I feel like it's super important, because a lot of guests, they think, well, they don't find out, and if they find out, they'll drop me and it's not a big deal, I'll just stop doing Turo. Well, that's not the issue. The issue is actually that if, let's say, you get into an accident during the off rental period where your insurance is supposed to be covering, right. And let's say you're at fault and you total your car, and somehow they have ways to find these things out. Somehow your insurance company finds out that you're doing Turo, they can come back and say, hey, you know what, actually, we're not going to pay the claim. You are insured, and you're purposes. Yeah, because your policy is void, because we specifically stated in there that you cannot use it for, even though it's kind of silly, because you would think like when the car is rented, which is probably most of the time, if you're just using it for Turo, it's being covered by Turo's insurance plan or coverage plan. It's not really an insurance plan, but so you would think they wouldn't care, but they do. And so that's just a big consideration to take into account, that a lot of either Turo hosts don't know about, or they just are kind of like, well, like I said, they just think, well, I'll get dropped. Well, yeah, but you can be in a really bad situation if you totaled your car. Now you owe $30,000, $40,000 to the bank. You have no car, and your insurance company says, nope, your policy was void. You don't actually have coverage because you're doing Turo. So I would say that's probably the number one thing to look into. And then, of course, your numbers to make sure that it's even worth, getting into.
So you got, she just gave you double tips, so y'all should be grateful. And we'll be sure to leave a link to the video that she was referencing in the description and the pinned comment, as well as her YouTube channel, which y'all should definitely check out. There's a lot of good content just about Turo in general. But I will say this about the insurance. Do you know how it works? Like if an accident was to happen, I am comparing it to Uber and Lyft, because a lot of people are probably in the same headspace that this is all in the same category. I don't think it should, but most people are going to assume it is. Uber and Lyft, they obviously do have commercial insurance, and they will cover an accident, but only if you file a claim with your insurance and they deny you. So the thing about that is, well, obviously they are going to deny you if you don't have rideshare insurance. They're going to drop you. And then Uber and Lyft would cover it, but they have a $2,500 deductible, which is, but they only cover you after you've already attempted to go through yours. Do you know if Turo works the same way, where like, hey, our insurance will kick in, as the backup if yours fails, or would they just cover it in general? Do you happen to know?
Yeah. So, and this one is also something that's like very, like, there's a lot of little nuances that, thankfully I've never had a claim, but I've read, I've done a lot of research on it. But so there's a few things, because Turo will charge the guests for insurance. So there's the guest insurance. Sometimes they'll waive that and they'll just say, just use their personal insurance. Although people need to be careful, because sometimes guests insurance, like your personal insurance, won't cover you to rent a car on Turo. So that's a whole nother side too. But the overall is that Turo charges the guests for insurance, then they charge us for insurance as well. So we also pay, basically, again, it's not a real insurance policy, but it does the same thing. And you basically decide what your deductible is going to be. So they have different plans. So they have like a 60%, a 70%, and that's basically like what part of the revenue do you keep? That's how it's based. So you can keep, for example, I have mine on the highest, which is the 90 plan. So I keep 90% of my revenue. So in essence, I'm paying 10% for my insurance policy, but I have a high deductible, 2,500, I believe it is. So the Turo plan will cover the claim if it's during the rental period. So the last time I read their terms of service, it was that when you are driving to deliver the car, it's already covering you. So then you drop off the car, it's covering the car during the rental period. And then once the car gets dropped back off by the guest, it ends there. And again, this is like the last time I checked it, could have changed, but it ends there. So if anything happens during that time, it's covered under the Turo plan. But then, even then, there's different ways to handle it. So for example, you are given the option to deal with the guests directly. So I've heard of hosts that like contact the guest directly, because that way they can kind of get the host to cover everything. I'm sorry, the guest to cover everything, including the deductible that I would have had, because I have a 25. Yeah, so that's why this is very, there's a lot of little, but I have heard of hosts that contact the guests directly and have even recovered, gotten the full whatever claim amount. Let's say it costs $800. They've been able to just get the full $800. Then you have hosts who, you also have the option of just saying, no, just let Turo deal with it. Turo can contact them, but then you're going to have your deductible guaranteed, whatever that deductible is. So it's pretty much the same as, typical insurance. It's just, there's another few little layers of things to think about. And also I've heard of hosts that like have had their cars totaled, but have actually made money from it because they bought it at a great price. And now Turo paid them, $2,000-$3,000 more for their car than what they purchased it for. So they actually ended up making money on a total loss. So there's just a lot of, of course, assuming you bought at a good price.
So it's very circumstantial.
Yeah, there's a lot of little details and things that, would affect the outcome. Your plan, their plan, just lots of things to, definitely I would recommend. And we can put also the links to to all of these Turo sites so that people can read up on their own. Because I do suggest that everybody should read the terms of service to just get familiarized with them, and just make sure with anything that you get into, you just want to make sure you can learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, obviously, because otherwise you'll just keep learning forever. But definitely should check that out, and check out all of these little, just overall.
Okay. And you mentioned it's called a car share. So does that mean if someone actually did want to get a policy out there that actually wouldn't mind them driving for Turo, would they get car share insurance? Or is that a thing? Do you know? Because I know for rideshare insurance is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and even with ride sharing, there's still some companies that don't want to allow it.
Right.
Yeah. So there, I know there's a few states that have now come out with a law that says you can't drop the insured just because they're car sharing. So those people should be good. They may want to look into that. I believe California, and don't quote me, but I just know there's a few states. For those that don't have that, there are a few insurance companies. So I think Liberty Mutual is one that I contacted, and they would offer it, but it was a ridiculous cost. Now they did tell me that I should reach out again to like it's another specific department that they have that, they suggested just reach out to them because maybe they'll be able to work with you on the cost. But basically the cost was like almost the cost of my car payment. So it was like ridiculous. So that was just out of the question. But there are a few options if your car is just being used for Turo, if you're not also using it for personal reasons. So there's 3 insurances, and again, I have this, that's included in that in that video. There's ABI, Lula, and GMI, I believe it's what it's called, and they're basically like these commercial. Well, these are like agencies that work with insurance companies, and what they do is they give you a commercial policy that's going to cover your car for the time that it's not rented. But you can't use it for personal use. So it's basically just covering your car to take it to get, car wash, to take it to get maintenance, for business purposes. Now, how much how much wiggle room is in there? Like they do give you an allowance. So they give you like 300, they vary, but it's like 200 to 300 miles per month to use for that purpose. So there are options. But assuming that you're not using the car for personal reasons. But again, even then, if you're barely using the car, if you just use it once or twice for personal reasons, maybe that's something that they'll even be willing to kind of work with you. And that part I still haven't contacted anyone about. But yeah.
Okay. So, because the thing about the insurance world, things change so slowly, even though I think the world is just slow in general. It's kind of annoying because like it took forever for companies to start coming out with policies for rideshare. Like for the longest time, it was literally like, hey, you're just playing Russian roulette and it's not even an option to find a rideshare policy. In fact, it was so extreme that let's say if you started quoting, like just getting quotes for a rideshare policy, you could be listed in the insurance base just from getting a quote as a rideshare driver. And that means that potentially your insurance could find out months later and drop you, which is just kind of crazy. But things have changed nowadays. There's actually a lot of companies that are offering rideshare policies now. And it looks like the same thing is steadily happening with the Turo rental world. Well, I'll say the car rental world, because Turo is just one platform, but obviously there's Turo, there's Hire Car, there's probably platforms that I don't even know about that are out there. So as things evolve, it's just kind of like make sure you keep doing your research, right?
Yeah, definitely. I keep, every once in a while, I'll just do another Google search on insurance just to see if they've solved, that issue. I think it'll probably happen just because it's kind of silly. Like if you think about it, there's like you said, just like it happened with Uber,
Right.
But it's like if your car is really rented most of the time on Turo and it's being covered by Turo, why wouldn't you want to also take in some, charge some money for a car that's barely being touched, and the liability that you have is so minimal. So I think eventually they'll come around and start realizing that they gotta, Turo is becoming a lot bigger from like all the videos and things I've read. They're actually going to be going public. I know that I think someone mentioned recently that Hire Car, I think, that went out of business. I'm not sure, but they're definitely the largest one. So I would think that eventually insurance companies will realize that they gotta like catch up.
Right. You made me curious. I actually Googled Hire Car, and they still pop up. So I guess they're still in business. But yeah, maybe they're
Yeah, there may be something going on with them.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that I think in a video recently.
At the end of the day, like these policies, they're basically it's like a tier list, and like the most expensive thing you can get if you're using something for commercial purposes is commercial insurance, and that'll run you like $3,000 to $6,000 per year. But it's like to get that wouldn't make sense because you're not using it for the same thing. Like the way I want to put it is, I like that's why I like the fact that rideshare insurance became a thing because it's something in between like normal insurance and commercial insurance, where it's not going to be expensive as commercial insurance, but obviously you might be a little more than regular insurance. And I see the same thing developing in this market. So yeah. But
Yeah,
speaking
and
of
just to add to
car,
that, like if before you move on to something else, I just want to mention
yeah,
that yeah, there are a lot of hosts that also do like private rentals. So they have like their cars under an LLC, which I'm actually looking into to do possibly maybe not for these two because I wanted to get these two fairly quickly, but they do have their cars under an LLC, and then they have commercial policy, and then even like an like umbrella coverage, just because of the number of cars that they have, and and then
right.
that way they're also able to do private rentals as well as the Turo. So yeah, that
Except for
definitely is an option.
No Turo service fee though. So that'd be because I'm pretty Turo's charging something for you to be able to use their platform, right?
Yeah, it's basically the plan that you pick.
Right.
So the cheapest would be the 10%, where they take 10% of your revenue.
Yeah. So basically,
The
revenue share.
bad, yeah, the thing with, and there's also a lot of videos out there about like private, versus Turo. The thing with that is that Turo is handling everything for you. They're vetting, they have the website, they have the market, the available the guests looking for for cars. They vet, they do the vetting for you.
Yeah.
They charge the money for you. They handle the claim. They do all that, and that's something that you would be doing on your own if you were going into like private rentals. So,
Right.
is it worth the 10% fee? I kind of think I kind of think so, unless you're at a point where depending on like at what level you're at.
Okay. Well, I will say this: if someone was going to go direct, would you give them this advice too? Obviously, you need to handle all that, but Turo doing the background check and checking for things on their record, that's pretty useful. Like, let's say if someone was to rent on Turo and it was a good experience, then they come back in town maybe a few months later, they want to rent through you again. You're like, but you have commercial insurance. Like, hey, we could just do this direct. Turo still vetted that person, so they're good. But this time let's just do it without the 10%, and maybe I can give you somewhat of a discount too. That's different than like, hey, I'm just taking people off Craigslist or something, and I haven't done the background check, and they may have DUIs on their record, and so like you could also use Turo as a kind of a lead generator if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I just don't know how much. I mean, as it is, I think they even have like a thing against like doing. I know they have a thing that you can't have your car like on another platform in their terms of service, of course.
They all do.
But they
I find
probably
that stuff
also
annoying.
have, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of one of those, like yeah, you could probably do that. But you know,
Right, right. Yeah, I know what you
we
mean.
won't say it on here.
Hey, you didn't hear from us. All these
No.
platforms have that in their terms of service. We'll just leave it at that. But
Yeah.
speaking of cars on like Turo, one of the biggest reasons I was looking at getting involved with Turo is the tax benefits. So a lot of people don't know that if you're actually renting your car out to a guest, as Turo puts it, then they're driving that car. You can take advantage of the standard mileage deduction as long as that's the deduction you're going to use when you're filing your taxes. So I want to ask you, how do you exactly track your mileage for each car so that you can take advantage of that standard mileage deduction, which usually hovers around like 58 cents per mile. IRS goes up and down as they please, but usually hovers around that amount. But how do you track your mileage for each car?
Yeah, so actually the process of like checking a car out, checking it in and out
Hmm.
includes, you taking pictures. So you're going to document your car, to make sure that if there's any issues after. So you're going to take pictures at the beginning and at the end of the trip, and that includes the odometer. And so I believe now once you take the picture, it looks like it actually reads it and puts it in there. But either way, you have a picture of the odometer. So it asks you, either it puts it in for you automatically, or it asks you to put it in as part of the checkout process, check in and check out. So then Turo keeps track of that. And the reason for that too is because, not every host has like unlimited miles. So you can set certain requirements. Like I don't want the car to be, I want a 200 mile max per day allowance. And if you go over that, then you're going to be charged, 30, 40, 50 cents, whatever it is. So that's the main reason for keeping track of that. But then it also helps you, like you said, Turo now has the ability to, where you download all of your data into an Excel. You download it as an Excel. And so you see all of the data there. So that's a very easy way to just keep track of your miles if you wanted to do the actual mileage.
Okay. And I know we talked about doing stuff direct, but I will get on the side of these businesses for a sec. They do a lot of things for you. Like a lot of people talk about in the Airbnb space, like doing direct bookings and stuff. And I've always kind of told people, I'm not against it as long as you know what you're doing, but keep in mind that these OTAs, Airbnb, Verbo, Booking.com, they are doing a lot of things for you. They are keeping track of things for you. And it makes it so easy for you to actually conduct and run a business using their tools because they're doing a lot for you. If you take them out of the equation, that means that you have to do that stuff. And the same kind of applies with the Turo situation. Because if you weren't, let's say if you weren't doing Turo at all, but you're still in this business, then you would have to keep track of that stuff. So I guess theoretically, at the beginning of the year before you do any trips, you need to take a picture per car of the mileage. And then at the end of the year, take a picture of the mileage, assuming you're just using it for Turo, then you can do that. But that is somewhat of a hassle. You had to do that for each vehicle. So this is something that Turo is doing for you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's also other. Since you brought up again the doing it on your own, there's a lot of other just things to take into account too. Like I heard, like for example, I was in an interview I was watching. The host mentioned the scenario where a guest left the car in another state, and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just couldn't make." They gave him some story, and so they basically Turo had to end up going and towing the car all the way back. And luckily, Turo, charged the guests for a non-return, for the towing, charged for, late fee, all these fees. And if you had been doing that on your own, that's something that you would be doing out of pocket.
Right.
You would, have to figure a way to charge the guests on your own and all that, but you'd be like fronting all this and just a lot. There's just a lot of things that,
And you'd have to have the terms of service that they signed in the contract for you to be able to legally charge the card. And if you didn't, they could dispute it. And yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a lot. You're going to have to have your own contracts. You're going to have, people to handle claims. Depending on how big so that's like a whole nother world. I really think that that's more the level of like a much bigger host that wants to go start doing private rentals. Just even the insurance, the fact that you would need commercial insurance, that right there is just a big game, a big variable to take into account.
Right. Okay. Now my audience, they're going to destroy me if I don't ask this question, but they're going to want to know like this Turo thing, like how much money do you tend to make on a monthly basis, like with Turo?
So I'll give you the number and then I'll give you the big disclaimer. So I did a video where I talked about revenue versus profit. I went into detail about everything, but I really honed in on the important part, which is what makes each of these things up. Because me giving you a number means nothing, right? Because it is totally dependent on so many different variables. So in my case, when I did this video, I think I had numbers through August, I think. And I basically took my revenue from Turo, I threw in my expenses, and then I figured out what I had netted. So through August, I was at about 15,000 in revenue just from that one car for this year. And I was netting about, and this doesn't take into account depreciation because that's a whole nother, but just to give you an idea, this is netting obviously before taxes and depreciation. I was netting about $800 a month for the one car, and that's considering that, so it was like 780 or something, but that's considering that I also have been paying for some of the management of the car. So like I have my brother or my cousin help me. So sometimes I think I only did like a few, maybe like 4 trips that I actually went and picked up the car myself and either washed it or got it washed. But for the most part, they did most of the other trips. And so I was paying them, and I was paying them a pretty nice amount, hourly rate. And so that's considering those expenses. And so that's why I say, like, it really, really, really varies on, it varies on your market. It varies on, your revenue first is going to vary, like what market you're in, what car you have, what did you set your prices at? Are you competitive? So are you getting a lot of, rentals? It's seasonal as well. So some markets are seasonal. So your revenue is going to depend on all of that. Then your profit is going to depend on a whole nother set of even different variables, like what's your car payment? Did you get a crazy, did you get a 3-year, and so your car payment's ridiculous, or did you, did you pay for it cash? Are you able to drop off the car and pick it up on your own? Like, do you have a spouse that's going to drive with you and then come back, or are you paying for Ubers each time? Which, in the case of Ubers, I mean, just as a side note, like, you are charging delivery. So you have your rates, and then you charge, like, for example, $100, $115 for delivery to airports. So that covers, should cover the Uber charges. But again, that's why it's hard to say, like, what would somebody else be able to make, because it depends. Are you managing the cars yourself, or are you paying somebody to go help you pick them up and wash them? And are you maintaining them yourself, or do you know about mechanics, or do you have to take it to so that's why it is such, like, when somebody says, oh, you're going to make this, it's like, it's impossible to say that. But on average, you hear where people typically kind of make like when you always hear somebody say, for example, I have 20 cars, they're typically making like 20,000 a month. So it's, on average, like 1,000 per car. But again, that's very, like, it depends on the car, on everything I just mentioned. So, but you can make somewhere in that. And like I said, in my case, I believe with all of the expenses that I, calculated, it was about like $700-800 net.
Okay.
Which is not bad.
Hearing you say that, it sounds very similar to conducting a short-term rental business to some degree, in terms of the variable costs. Like, someone who has, the sweet spot for a studio apartment is for it to be able to cash flow at least $600 to $1,000 net. And if you drop below 600, something's not right. You need to go redesign the place, or maybe your rates are too low. Something needs to be taken into consideration. If you make more, who's going to complain about making more? But different people have different costs. Like, if you're hiring a housekeeping, like, your housekeepers charge high flat fees usually. So it might be closer to that $600 a month if you're doing that. You could hire your own housekeepers, train them up, pay them per hour, $12, $13, $14 an hour. And maybe you'd be making around $800 per month. Or if you go in there and do the housekeeping yourself, well, you don't have any fees, but you're still charging the cleaning fee. Well, you have the cleaning supplies, but supplies are pretty cheap. So it's like you be getting closer to the $1,000. That's 3 different scenarios, but it's because of that one variable cost. Hearing you explain how money works, it seems like it's pretty similar in terms of the variable cost.
Yeah, exactly. Like, some people may have, a job, and they are doing this sort of as a side thing, and they don't mind giving up a little bit of, of revenue to not have to handle it yourself, because, to be able to still focus on your job. And so, like, you don't mind giving up a little bit of revenue. Some others may not have a job. Maybe they're retired. Maybe, or maybe they decided to go, all in on this, and that's all they want to do. And so yeah, that's why it really, really varies, like you just said, on each person's situation. And then again, of course, you want to just make sure every car is going to be different. And we can, if you want, we can kind of get into like how to, because there's places and tools like that you can go look at, that'll give you a really good idea, in terms of like what car to buy, how much revenue you can make with each car.
Okay, well, I mean, you kind of teased the audience, so we might as well go into it.
Yeah, no, I just didn't want to interrupt your flow. But yeah, so one thing is like Turo has their own calculator, which now they actually put out like a more advanced one. And we can drop that link in the description as well. Where you basically go in, you can pick like they have like they can either do like a national average, or they have like actual specific areas if they're like the pretty, bigger markets. And you basically just go in and put in, you can see all types of cars. You can change the variables if you wanted to customize it a little bit more towards your specific needs. But it gives you a really good ideas like what the ROIs are for specific cars. And then there's also this app that just came out recently. It's not an app per se. It's like a plugin, like a Chrome plugin, where basically it like scrubs the Turo data. So you go on it and you click into your area and you start navigating around. And I'll probably be doing a video explaining on how to use that. But basically you just kind of start shifting around on the Turo app, and it just starts pulling in all this information. And then it fills in all this extra information for you of like how much the car was rented, how long it's been. So at the end, you could end up with this huge spreadsheet of like all the cars in your market and how much they've been rented, how long they've been on the platform, what their daily rates are. And of course, this is not an exact, because, for example, it could consider that it's rented and actually it's in the shop, so it's unavailable. So, there's because obviously they don't have access to private data, to the actual, hosts and guests booking data. But it gives you a pretty good, pretty decent idea if you're going to start really seriously thinking about getting. So like right now, that's what I've been doing a lot of, and like, for example, one really high ROI car is Fiat. Surprisingly, it's a cheap car, which is why, but it really has, for some reason, it has a very high ROI.
Hey.
But yeah, those are tools that you could, if you really are interested and you really want to, because you definitely don't want to get into this and just say, I'm just going to pick a car that I like and go out there and just buy it. Like you really want to like do as much research and really like, study the numbers and yes, of course, at the end, anything could happen, but at least you went into it with as much, research done and as much, projections as possible.
Right. Good tip. I am curious about like you mentioned that you do need to drop the car off sometimes. When I went to Houston with one of my friends for a festival, he rented a car in Turo, and he picked me up in my place. Then we stayed there for a few days in Houston at an Airbnb. And then when we came back, he dropped me back off in my place, but he said he needed to go drop the car back off to the owner. So I was always under the impression that the guest goes to pick the car up, but what you're telling me is I guess it can go either way. Can you give like the guest an option to go pick the car up, and it's free, or you can deliver it to them for that fee? So it's basically an option for them.
Yeah, and obviously the host sets whatever they want, but you can give them the option of just picking it up at a certain location. So if that's the case, like for example, I never put the house location. I always have like a nearby like a retail store parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just put that address, and they'll go pick it up there. Or you can say, I deliver to this airport, certain airports, or even certain like the train station, or basically just say I'll deliver for $120 to anywhere in the 20-mile radius. So they can actually have it even delivered to their house if they just want to get up and have the car, parked in front and not have to go anywhere. So you do have that ability to decide, however you want, and you can charge for delivery.
I was just thinking.
And the other,
well, when you said that, I was just thinking, what if you actually live by a train station, like literally it's in walking distance, like 2-3 minutes, and you charge like a delivery fee to deliver the car to the train station, and then obviously you deliver it, they drop off, then you just walk home, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much like what we have at our home location. Yeah, definitely. If you live close to an airport, that's like a big benefit. Um, in my case, I think I've only had like 2 or 3 trips where they've booked like to pick up. The rest have been airport deliveries because it's just so convenient.
Right, right.
They come out of their plane and they go right into the car. And then just one other thing about that is that now, a few years back, this wasn't as big, but now, with the whole COVID and like I don't see any guests at all. Like I drop off the car at the airport and the keys are in a Faraday bag. So in a bag that blocks out the signal, and you leave the key inside the glove box, and it's called Turo Go. And as long as like your card's like a connected car, like, so like how Chevy has like their Chevy OnStar or whatever, and then like BMW have like their, my BMW, whatever connected car thing, where you're able to like access the car remotely. So you link it to Turo, and so the guest basically just comes out of their flight, walks up to the car, they start their check-in on the app, take the pictures, and then they can unlock the car right from there, and then they just grab the key and go. So you really don't even have to like see anybody. You don't have to, which makes it really, really, really convenient because you're not limited to a specific time. So like if let's say you have a job to get to, you can drop off the car at 9 a.m. as opposed to at 12 to be able to get to work. Of course you're going to be paying parking because you do have to, pay the parking at the airport. But it's just convenience, Now you can have a full-time job and still do this if you wanted to, because you can drop off the car the night before. If you're going on a trip or something, you can have the car that just dropped off the night before. You can pick it up at you're not limited to like 5-minute window to meet the guest and like, do the handoff.
I didn't know it was, I guess the technical term would be contactless. I didn't know that that was a thing. But now that I think about it, Turo would be affected by the pandemic like everything else. So that brings another component to it. Oh, wow. I think she's trying to.
Yeah, that's very convenient.
Yeah.
I should be getting some Turo commission.
Yeah. I don't know if they have an affiliate program, but if they do,
no, I think they used to.
It is. But speaking of commissions, I'm kind of curious because there's a lot of industries that kind of parallel this one. We've already talked about some of them, where you have upselling opportunities, like in the short-term rental game with Airbnb. You could upsell things like available inside your apartment, whether it be amenities that people want. Like I don't do this, but like toilet paper or dishwashing liquid or like pods for a washer. Is there any kind of upselling opportunities that you've come across when it comes to Turo, where you can make additional money on top of like obviously the money you're making with them?
Yeah, the main one, so they call it extras. Okay. And the main thing would be like car seats. Like, when you go to a car rental company and they charge you for car seats, and again, the prices vary. You can set a daily price for it, or you can set like a full trip price. But I actually purchased a car seat and already made the money back on it, and and then some. I think I've rented it 3 times already. Yeah, I've already. But it is also just for your convenience. You're just offering convenience as well, because I mean, what is a guest going to do if they travel with a child and they're going to have to carry all these, the car seats with them, and or go rent. They have rental places, but it's just convenience. It's sitting there in the car for them, So yeah, you can do that. They have a ton of extras. You can add beach gear. So people, depending on the market, they may want beach gear. They may want ski gear, snow gear. I've seen camping. So they have a lot of presets on the site that you can already just pick from and then just add your details. So yeah, there's also like prepaid gas, if they don't want to, because just as with other car rental companies, they have to bring the car back and, you give it to them with a full tank of gas and they bring it back with a full tank, or you're able to charge obviously the gas that was missing plus a $10 fee. And so you can also offer like prepaid gas. You can also do like unlimited miles if you don't already offer that. You can offer it as an extra. So yeah, there's a lot of other little extras you can throw in there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about the car seat thing. Like, that's so common sense. I feel like I need to slap myself for not thinking about that. For the audio listeners, I did just slap myself, so you get to have a laugh at myself. So we're about to start wrapping up the podcast, but I always ask my guests if they have any questions they want to hit me with, whether it be really anything. But my audience has banned the question of why'd you start the Side Hustle Society podcast, because they've heard that answer too many times. So you got any questions you want to hit me with?
So when are you starting Turo?
Honestly, based on this podcast, I might actually look into it probably in the middle of next year. I don't have to do this. I could probably do it the standard route, but I tend to want to buy things in cash and then make the money back as quickly as possible, than just be in the profit. So that calculator you mentioned, I'm real interested in typing in like what cars that would be like under 30,000 have huge ROIs. Then maybe getting the car, maybe in cash, and putting that on the platform, and then seeing how fast I can make the money back, and maybe making a video about the experience. But I plan on doing that with a lot of things that can be considered side hustles. So that would just be one of them. But obviously, after I do that video, I probably would just keep doing it, because it seems like the money scene. I didn't know about that contactless part. You put me up on game there, because it means that I'm not going to say it could be passive. Well, it could if I hire someone to do certain things, but it could be very convenient for me too. So, yeah, maybe middle of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the passive part, like in my video, I comment on how passive it was. And like in my case, because I had, family that I was paying to help me with it, I basically, made $5,000 for 3 hours worth of work a week, maybe, because then that included because for example, messages, I have automated messages that go out to the guests once they book. An automatic message goes out, customized, that says, hey, so-and-so, thanks for booking, this car at this location. Here's how to check in. Here's how to find the car, check in. Here's, some reminders. And you can make it car specific. So I actually have a video on that too, like automated messages and my templates. So like if people just wanted to grab a template and go.
Similar to Airbnb. I already have those systems set up for each
you just have to
automatic messages, and
it just makes sense. And that's really the kind of stuff that makes it more like passive, the more you can automate. I'm actually working now on an app for it that I've been working on for a while, because when I started doing it, I started putting things in spreadsheets. So for example, like my brother would go out and he would, fill up the car, or he would get maintenance on it, and then he would send me the receipt. And sometimes he'll use the credit card I gave him, and sometimes it didn't go through, or he left it at home, or, so I have to keep track of like, well, did he pay for it? And what trip was it relating to? And so I obviously I started a spreadsheet because, I have everything on spreadsheets. But I'm like, I quickly realized like I do not want to handle this on a spreadsheet. But the funny thing is that if you hear a lot of hosts, on YouTube, like doing interviews or whatever, they'll all say like a lot of them are still handling everything on spreadsheets. So I've actually started creating an app for myself, and that I'm probably going to, maybe work with hosts to get it out there. That's basically like a little management app that you run on your own. And it handles all that for you. So now like my brother, instead of, having to send me all that and me keeping it on spreadsheet, he would just open his mobile and just take a picture of the receipt right there. And it'll just attach to that trip. And then of course the app is going to do all these sort of calculations. Like I would have to manually, well, in Excel, I would be calculating like, what do I owe him? Have I paid him for these? And that's just the management side. Then you have the side of, which I'll just mention briefly, is that a lot of these bigger hosts will tell you that you really need to treat, if it's going to be a business, you really need to treat it as like a, every car should have like its own P&L, every car, because really, like, you can have 20 cars and one could be just draining your business, and you won't know it if you're not running things on a per car, seeing your numbers per car. So this will also help in that I'm able to quickly see, like, how much did I spend on this car? Is this car costing me a lot to clean every single time? Or is it, the maintenance killing me and I'm just not, so all those things I would be having to manually calculate. So that's why I'm also working on like an app to be able to like facilitate all that.
Oh,
it's the engineering side of me. I can't just use a spreadsheet.
Right, the system side of you. I do the same thing for each of my studio apartments that I have on Airbnb. Each one is calculated separately to see like how much it actually is cash flowing. And I've actually had to do this with one apartment before, but for me, if it drops below a certain amount, then I just don't renew the lease. I'll take all that furniture and move it to another studio apartment, because that means that something is usually going on with that area. And I move it to another apartment, and usually that I've only had to do it once, but ever since I've done it, that unit that I moved the stuff to has been insanely profitable. So yeah, but if you just kind of look at everything in one big lump, you don't know if you would cut something off or replace something, it might actually be better for you. So I think a lot of people benefit from that app once you finish it. And I know you said it is some you're looking at personally, but you might make it available to hosts later. And if you do, I think it's probably filling a hole in the market. As far as I know, I don't think there's anything out there like that specifically for Turo.
Yeah, they have big. They have like apps for big, mostly private hosting, like. So for private rentals, they have these big softwares, but they still also don't have a lot of, they're still missing a few little things. And they're not incorporating, like I've made it to where it's going to, Turo recently closed their API. They had their API open. So there was an actual app that was linking to them and was doing a lot of these things. And it was like amazing. And actually they lost access in April. So I've had to create like workarounds to be able to like pull the data, put it into my database, put it, have it pull into my app. But yeah, it's still going to have a more, and even if I'm actually going to be doing some videos in the next week or so, showing it, because even if somebody wanted to, like, it's something that they could even create on their own, because I'm using this like low coding system. So whether they wanted to create something or even like a lesser scale without even getting to the app, it's this lesser way of like basically automating instead of using spreadsheets. I'd have to, go into detail to explain, but yeah, they could basically, look at the video and do it themselves, or then of course, like if I get to a point where I can like start, that I can share it, or if somebody wants to reach out and just has a few questions so that they can get going, that's fine too. But yeah, and the other thing I'll mention is that just in case if there are hosts out there that actually do co-hosting. We didn't mention that, and that's one thing to keep in mind. So that if you don't want to do this yourself, but if you have a car sitting there or you are willing to buy 2 or 3 cars, there are hosts out there that will manage it for you, and they'll charge, what I've typically seen is they'll charge you, basically they'll give you 65 to 70% of the revenue.
So they charge 30%? Oh.
Yeah. But
30,
but you're also covering your own car payment and your own, but I guess it makes sense because there's a lot of hosts out there with a lot of other people's cars that they're hosting. So of course every host is different. So you'd have to.
That model is the least risky. Like just like in the Airbnb game, like there's 3 models. There's owning, there's rental arbitrage where you're doing subleasing, or you have the permission from the landlord to put someone in there even though you're the primary person they're renting to. And then there's co-hosting, and the co-hosting is you're taking a percentage to manage someone's property and listing for them. And usually, if you're going to do everything, industry standard is 20 to 25%. It sounds like that same model is here too, except for you can charge more, 30 to 35%. But that means that if you cultivate the ability to work this platform and manage it, there's no risk. Like, you're just making money, but there's no risk on you. You don't need to go finance a car, get a car, or worry about like if it gets wrecked or anything like that. You're just making money and there's no risk. So I guess that's a model in itself.
Yeah, so just wanted to throw that out there in case. Just things to think about.
Wow. Well, I've learned a lot about this conversation, but there's even more to learn just by looking at your channel. So before we end the podcast, where can people get more of you? Like, name drop your channel, your social media. Feel free.
Yeah, so it's Engineer Your Life, and it's spelled like you see it below. Mine is the Yuly. But it's basically, right now it's really a tech channel. It's really just to teach entrepreneurs. It's to help entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals, anybody that wants to learn technology, wants to, they have a problem and they need help solving it through technology, like automating systems, processes, if finding efficiencies, finding, inefficiencies and solving them. So, I have an engineering degree, but I've also been like in the legal field my whole life. I've run a law firm, so I have like the, operational, financial also side of things. So it's more of that. Up until now, I've only focused on Turo. So all of my videos you'll find on there are Turo. And now I'm going to start incorporating some technology into it, but I'm going to still gear them towards Turo since I'll be using Turo as an example. So for example, these videos I'm going to be showing now about my app, I'm basically going to be doing it using Turo as, the example for the app. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Yuly, we got I'll say I appreciate you for coming on to the Side Hustle Society podcast. I know the audience got a lot of good game, and there's still more games to be had. Just check out her YouTube channel. We're going to go ahead and end this episode of the Side Hustle Society podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can give us a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. It's greatly appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new. And if you're listening to us on an audio platform, if you could leave a review on us, that's greatly appreciated. Let us know where we can improve, and it'll give us a hand in serving y'all. We'll catch y'all in the next episode. Peace out.
This episode may be over, but your hustling journey has just started. Visit thesidehustlesociety.com to access all links and resources mentioned in the show that will help you on your hustler's journey.